So we have the recording on. This is the lecture for Design 300. It's Thursday, December 3rd, and it is the ultimate class of the penultimate week. So penultimate means next to the ultimate. So it's the next to last week, and this is the last class of the next to last week. Anyway, that's all very confusing. Don't worry about it. So I want to do a real quick review of Units 6, 7, and 8, kind of by going through the final exam and seeing if you have any questions. And then I want to do some information only bit about Cal Green portion of Title 24 Building Code, sort of how that fits into what we're doing. And green design, sustainable design, I hope we all agree is extremely important. Taking care of our environment is important. Building to take care of our people in such a way that we take care of our environment, I believe, is very important. And so Cal Green addresses that. And I'm going to show it to you in a way that sort of fits in with this class. So here we go. And you should also know I did put the recording. I don't know why it took me so long. I put the recording of lecture from Tuesday on the calendar, so it's there now for anybody who was looking for it and missed it. Okay, so let's go first to the Cal Green portion of Title 24. It's kind of a cool thing. I'm going to make this bigger right now. So let's take a look and see, what does Cal Green mean? So Cal Green is part of what's called Title 24. Title 24 is the law that governs building in California. Now, I've had in the past students do assignments where they took the timeline from like 1905 through current to see how that came about, because we did not always have a Title 24. We didn't even always have a single building code. And what you find is originally California had tons of different codes. Health and safety took care of this, and Boilermakers took care of that, and fire people took care of that, and there were some local building codes. And then earthquakes would happen, and everybody said, we need one standard building code and one authority. And things would get tightened up a little bit, and then another earthquake would happen, and people would say, we need to tighten up and get it all under one authority, or a big fire would happen. And finally, I don't remember exactly when it was. I think it was in the late 50s. California sort of put together a pretty good building code, but it wasn't until the big earthquake down in Southern California in the 70s that everything got really pulled together tight. And Title 24 came into being. And you would think, Title 24, that's good. We've had.
Hey, Randy, you there?
Yeah, Nick, I'm doing a lecture right now. What's up?
I could come back at a different time. I just wanted to chat about next semester.
Okay, cool. Let's I'm going to hold on just a sec, other class. I'm going to post for you a place where you can sign up for a good time. Let's see. Here it is. No, that's not it. It's here somewhere. Hold on.
Yeah, you're good.
There it is. Share. Bank. Copy link. Done. Bank. I'm putting it in the text chat for this one.
The design 301
No,
text chat?
no, the 300 group text chat should be right up above
Oh,
this
there
one.
it is. Yeah, I see it.
Cool. And I just
Oh,
threw my appointment one right into there. So you can see when I'm cool and free.
all
Groovy?
right. No. Yeah, that works.
Okay, awesome. And there is some cool
All right.
stuff coming next semester, by the way. So,
All right.
so we'll be able to chat about that some. Cool?
All right. Cool. Yeah, then
Okay.
I'll talk to you later. All
Okay.
right. Bye.
Bye. All right, so back to Design 300. So Cal Green happened in about uh 2007. It became like really solid in 2010, and there have been updates, but we always had environmental building standards. So you go, okay, well, why did we need Cal Green if we always had environmental building standards? It's because architects would do their job and really do a cool thing, but then contractors would say, no, 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 that's going to be too expensive. I want a variance here, do this, do this. And to get the job, the best environmental stuff was always dropped. So, of all people, it was Arnold Schwarzenegger. You would not think that the Terminator or Kindergarten Cop or whatever role he played, you would not think, but Arnold Schwarzenegger was the champion of putting enforcement into those environmental standards, and Cal Green came about. I really have to tip my hat to Arnold Schwarzenegger for that. It was a hard job, and he got it done. So the difference between Cal Green and what had always been in there before is there was enforcement. Planning commissions have to do some mandatory things, and they have to enforce it. In other words, they have to check the building after it's been built to see if they met the standard. Wow. That was an incredible thing. So the scope is for non-residential. That's the biggest portion of it. It's non-residential. There are now some new residential portions. It applies to every non-residential new construction or renovation of a certain percentage that is done in California that is a commercial non-residential building. It now also applies to certain residential buildings, and some localities, local planning commissions, have adopted the residential portion for all of their work. So that's the scope. It's active because of the legislature. It is law. And so all of our building and planning derives its authority and its ability to enforce from the state legislature or the administration once the law is made. And so there have been laws, and they are now in the code. This is building code for California. And that code is called Title 24, and Part 11 is Cal Green. Wow! I'm telling you, to be a designer and to really understand all this and an architect, you've got to read codes. So that's why I thought it was important to take that course, if at all possible, about reading this kind of stuff, because it's huge. Okay, the code is updated every 2 to 3 years, and things that were optional 1 year, often on a regular plan, become mandatory, phased in. So that's what Cal Green is. It's kind of cool. It's neat. let's take a look at how it can be applied. Here's a building sheet. Here's a sheet that is often, this is a template from American Institute of Architects of California, that they suggest if you're doing some sort of a project that you use these sheets at the start or somewhere in your plans so that planners can know and you can just do some checkoffs. And this is all about Cal Green residential mandatory measures for 2020. So if you're in that size and complexity of a residential project that requires it, these are sort of, they've made it kind of a checklist. So let's take a look and see what applies. And again, this is for information only. There's just general about green building and what it applies to, low rise, high rise residential, mixed occupancy buildings, some abbreviations. So that's sort of like, what does this apply to, the scope? So then what do you have to do? There's things that you do in the planning and design that have to be taken care of. Some of those have to do with site development. That's what Unit 1 was all about, site development. Storm, water, drainage, and retention during construction, SWPPP. Grading and paving, we talked about these. Swales, French drains, water retention gardens, other measures. We didn't really talk about these, but there's a bunch about EV for new construction, electric vehicle charging. And particularly if you're doing high-rise or multi-use residential, that's becoming more and more a focus of the state. Then we go up to the next set. Let me make it a little bit bigger so you can see better. More, if you look at all this stuff about how many spaces are required, multiple EV spaces, identification. If you're doing hotels or motels, that's considered sort of in the residential area. How many parking spaces are there? So how many EV spaces do you need? This is all stuff that as a designer, you would want to be able to say, yep, check that, check that, check that. I can find where this is addressed in my plans. Energy efficiency. Now I got to go over some and go up. Let's talk about energy efficiency. They don't have anything about energy efficiency. Let's talk about water efficiency. Lots about plumbing fixtures. Okay, if they're non-compliant, they have to be replaced. Certify occupancy, final permit by the local building department. Water closets, that's a toilet. Gallons per flush. Tank type. US EPA water scent specs. Flush valve type. Urinals, shower heads. All of this is covered with requirements, performance requirements. Remember, we talked about that one thing that we do is we have performance requirements. We talked about it from a roof. Well, under water efficiency and conservation, you're talking about performance requirement, performance requirement, performance requirement, performance requirement, performance requirement, performance requirement. Okay, all over the place, there are performance requirements right here. And for outdoor use, they even have some performance requirements. So let's take a look at another segment. Materials of conservation. Durability, reduced maintenance, rodent proofing, construction waste management. And again, this is a design requirement. This is a performance requirement. Recycle and salvage for reuse a minimum of 65% of non-hazardous construction and demolition waste. Wow! That is really cool. It's amazing how much we require. That's really awesome. Waste management company, waste stream reduction, documentation, building maintenance and operation, web-based reference materials, a manual, compact disc, reference materials. You have to have all of this stuff. You have to have instructions about how the user is supposed to do this stuff and use this stuff. This is all now part of a code, and it is enforceable. So Cal Green is different than LEED. LEED is a voluntary certification that many of these items appear in your designs, and also that certain design steps have been taken in collaboration with the planning department and the neighborhood, but it's different than LEED. Some building owners require a LEED certification, and of course, as well as meeting Cal Green. And if you do well with one, in general, you are well set to do well with the other. So if you are used to working on Cal Green design, and your contractors are used to working on Cal Green certified projects that have made it through, then LEED certification at certain levels becomes fairly straightforward. But it is different. The documentation is different. Who you give it to is different. And there is no enforcement on LEED unless it's part of the documents between the owner and the occupant and the builder. If the occupant says, "And thou shalt build me a LEED platinum building," then if it's not LEED platinum, the owner has recourse to pay less or not accept the building. But it has to be in the contract. Cal Green, it just applies. It is the law, and there's a enforcement. So personally, I'm very happy that we have something like this. Some people thought, it's going to kill construction, and it's going to do this, and it's going to do that. It actually did the opposite. It created an entire new industry of inspections and certifications and waste stream management and design and people that would build things specifically for California use. It actually made our building industry stronger. It does not get rid of jobs. It creates jobs, and that's been proven. There's data. I can't put my hand on it. If you ask me to back it up, I'll ask you to go look for it for me. But you know that the building industry in California is strong, strong, strong. So Cal Green did not ruin our building industry. It actually created a whole new subset of jobs. And really, it did a really, really good job of helping to protect our environment and to do all that stuff. Now, I will tell you, I have a relative who belongs to the AIA, was actually the president of AIA San Francisco, has written a book on sustainable design. She is an architect. And her number one green design principle is use less stuff. Make a smaller building. And there are good design principles that make your building seem big while you're using less stuff. But that is actually the number one way to be green. In my cousin's opinion, who is a sustainable architectural design professional who has written textbooks on this and been part of the AIA, use less stuff. There. That's as simple as she makes it. And so I kind of like that. If in one of your designs you have an opportunity to use less stuff and you want to be green, I suggest you try to use less stuff if at all possible. So you can look through this document. I'll put I'll try to remember to find the link to it and put it in there. But this is just informational. Look, installers. Wow. Special inspections for installers of something. I don't know what they're installing there. Environmental comfort, HVAC, indoor air quality and exhaust, indoor moisture control, formaldehyde limits. Oh, that is such a big one. For veneer, compound, every particle board, fiber board, thin density. There is so much formaldehyde in our lives that I love to see that we're getting rid of it. VOC limits, that's volatile organic compounds. Those are the things that have been proven to make you sick and tend to build up in your body. Volatile organic compounds. Formaldehyde is one of the main sources of VOCs. Paint is another. Now, I will tell you, low VOC product usually works poorly compared to with high VOC when you talk about reliability, ease of application, long-term durability, maintenance. High VOC tends to really perform well. But of course, it's horrible for the environment. This is one of those trade-offs that industry works on extremely hard. And if you think the paint industry are a bunch of monsters and things like that, I will personally tend to disagree. I've worked closely with people in the paint industry that are working their tails off to come up with low VOC product that works well. Same with building industry people. So the people in these industries know that being environmentally sound is good business, but they also know that if their product doesn't perform, they get the tar beat out of them in the marketplace. Very, very, very difficult for these building product manufacturers. So I would hope that when you work with some of them and start calling out materials, that even if you come up with somebody who doesn't do a good job, that you're at least cognizant of the fact that they have probably been trying. One of the best ones is I use it a lot is DuPont makes some fiberboard product, and it's PVC, and they come up with all sorts of stuff to try to make it sound green, and it's not. But they're one of the most open and transparent companies that there is. So about it. So it's like, okay, well, they're trying. They're trying. Okay, so Eric, do you have any questions on that? Does that all sound? It's a huge area of interest, and you will get bits of it as you go through our program. But do you have any questions in particular to think about on these? I think for landscape, Trex it's Trex, right? Is that plasticky stuff that they recycle plastic and make fake wood products. And of course, that might be good or it might be bad. Doesn't It's got its own performance issues. So even in landscaping, things like that become difficult. Okay, then yeah, yeah. Um, and I'm telling you, it really is. When you start reading all this stuff, and then it says, "Oh, well, look at this other section of this, and this other section of this, of version 1.1 of such and such a date, also known as," oh my gosh, finding all that stuff is brutal, and tracking it down, and like, look, let's just take this as an example. How do you read this? Evaluation of volatile organic chemical emissions. So first of all, you have to go, okay, well, what is that? What is that? It's like, and it takes time. Emitted as gases from certain solids, a variety have short and long-term health effects. Okay, well, it's something that's emitted as a gas from a solid or a liquid. Okay, I got at least that part, and it can be adverse health effect. It can be bad for you. Okay, so I got that part. Standard method for testing using environmental chambers. Version 1. Specification. Oh my gosh. Well, unless I actually do the test, I don't care. Certified as a CHPS low emitting material in the Collaborative for High Performance Schools, CHPS, Collaborative for High Performance Product Database. So let's see if we can find that. And just at least know what they're talking about. This is how I go about doing this, by the way. High performance. What are CHP pre-approved products? Okay, well, here we go. This is all about it. Where do you get them approved? Blah, 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 blah. CHPS.net. Collaborative performance for high performance schools. Well, obviously they're concerned because I believe that, yeah, lots of Googling. And I would say probably half to 2/3 of what you Google barely touches on it, and then you'll find the one source that really talks about it well. And then I just start following links. Berkeley Analytical is emission testing certification program, testing labs, blah, blah, blah. Oh my gosh. Removing VOCs from the air? That might be really interesting. Wasn't what I was talking about, but that sounds cool. That sounds really interesting. So yeah, so when you Google, some of it seems copy and pasted versus being in depth. And look, what we're doing right now is such an introduction that it is just copy and paste so that you know that this exists. And then you start either looking for somebody who really knows or looking to see where they got their information from and start looking, okay, what is this? What is limonene? I don't know if that's even really a word. Aliphatic hydrocarbon classification as a cyclic and the major component of oil and citrus food The D-isomeric fragrance is fragrance agent in food manufacturing. And then you can see, oh, it's miscible with benzene and chloroform. Okay. So you know how you hear um, um, like pest control, and you hear on the commercial, it's orange oil, and da 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 da, and it's orange oil. And you go, oh, oil from oranges? That sounds pretty good. Orange oil. I'll use that. That'll be safe. But what they really do is they put this stuff in benzene or chloroform or some other horrible compound and just make it so that it's not so bad for us. Often they're required to put, like benzene, you can't just smell benzene or chloroform all on your own or some natural gases. So they put stinky stuff in it so that when you walk near it, you go, whoa, bad news, let me get away from here. Well, some places put good smelling stuff in it just so that you know that something is there. So that's how we do this. Yeah, you've heard of that orange oil stuff. Well, guess what? What is the number one defoliant that cause adding smell? Yeah, and you think of the term Agent Orange, and gives us many bad connotations, right? Agent Orange was not the it was the defoliant of choice, but of course the way it was used was maybe not in a way that was many people were not happy with what our country was doing with Agent Orange. But this idea of adding smells, yeah, and hopefully your dad didn't suffer from it. Because I do know some vets personally that suffered from it, and I've got a very, very good friend on the East Coast who teaches a form of jujitsu, and he actually teaches at Walter Reed Hospital for people with neurological disadvantages from Agent Orange, on how to cope with it through using martial arts. He also teaches paraplegics and quadriplegics how to do self defense. But I hopefully give your best to my dad if he did suffer adverse effects. Hopefully it wasn't too bad. But yeah, you can get. Oh yeah. I also worked with a Navy vet. Real interesting. He was Navy, but he was stationed on the ground because I guess they had some stations where they would land and take off midway if they couldn't get back. And his job was to burn the spent jet fuel. So if there was a small amount of jet fuel left in the tanks, he had to actually empty it, refill, and then burn the existing jet fuel. And he actually was my engineering supervisor for a number of years. But there were days when he would call in. He goes, "Nope, it's a jet fuel day," and we knew that he was just having. No, yeah, I mean you can imagine what type of hazardous equipment they had. Zero, zero. Anyway, there we go. That got off topic pretty far. But it's just a way of doing the research, right? No, that's cool. It's good. That's what research is about. And what we hope is when you take a class like this, it spurs you to look far afield and gather information, and then pull it back in and bring it into what the information is about. So, and it is all part of green design, right? we've got to be careful with how we're managing our waste stream. I can remember when I was a kid growing up here in the Sacramento Valley, I could see the foothills and the Sierras at the same time, just turning left or turning right, um, 90% of the days. And you just can't do that anymore. There are days when you can. I appreciate trying to get back to that. I can remember days when I'd look up and for an hour on end, you couldn't see past all the honkers, all the geese flying by. The huge, huge flocks of geese flying overhead and the cacophony. And it would last, now it lasts like 2 minutes and it would last an hour. I kind of appreciate the fact that we've done this. I would love for future generations to have the memories that I've got. So I believe in green design and green design standards, and I believe in material research and doing the best job you can. And that's all you can do. The best job you can. There's one other standard, ISO 14000, which is an environmental design standard. Cal Green is a focused subset of what you would find in here. ISO is International Standards Organization, and 14,000 encompasses many other ones, but it's a management standard. How does your organization manage environmental issues? So if you're a design group, how would you manage environmental design? If you're a manufacturing group, how would you manage the manufacturing of your product in an environmentally sensitive way? If you're a service group, how do you ensure that your service is working for the environment instead of against the environment? So those are it's real interesting. And of course, any authority that accepts this, we don't accept this in the United States, which is a shame. It's been around much longer than Cal Green, and it's an international standard which can be applied anywhere. And it's an interesting one to look at. It's very similar in many ways to Cal Green, but its scope is international and it's a little bit more broad because it's of the management, not just the design. It's a management of the design function, and the authority, of course, it is just whoever has inculcated this into their laws, which is most of the European Union, much of Southeast Asia, Australia and New Zealand use something else. It's called Quality Australia, but they reference this a lot in the Australian standard. I don't know about Africa. I've never been in it. I do know that there are locations in South America that do use this. And the enforcement, of course, would be up to whoever is using it. And so the standard has been around. I can remember first seeing it when I was doing ISO 9000 work, and that would have been in the very late 80s, very early 90s. The ISO 9000 was becoming very strong, and they were just starting to talk about the ISO 14000 spreading its wings. So it's been, I would say, since the early 1990s, almost 30 years. This has been a powerful tool. CalGreen has been a powerful tool for about 10 years. And LEED is pretty old too. LEED has been around since the 70s or 80s. Okay? Does that give you a little bit of good background on green design? So let's talk now just a little bit about reviewing units 6, 7, and 8. And I think the easiest way to do that is to look at what the final exam is, because that's really about 6, 7, and 8. So let me look at the timed assessment, final exam. And has anybody taken it yet? Nope. I don't think anybody's taken it yet. So let's look at a preview of it. So question 1 is just very quickly, what concrete material did you include in your portfolio, and explain the benefits of it? So this is letting you show that you can quickly and easily write about some specific concrete material or rebar or standoffs or whatever, and pull the benefits and drawbacks. That should be a cut and paste right from it, but you should just know a little bit about concrete there. Describe how Portland cement is made. That is critical. Okay? And look, it should be more than they burn stuff up in a kiln. Oh yeah, that is what they do, but I think the descriptions were a little bit more complex than that. You should be able to say what the materials are that are burnt up in the kiln, and why that's done, and what gets separated, and what your Portland cement comes out as. Okay? From your steel material research, provide a summary of the product or process. Again, it's cut and paste. So did you talk about MIG or TIG or riveting or all the different angle irons that are available, angle shapes or whatever? And where and how and why it's used. So if it's MIG, it's used in manufacturing of steel structural components, normally in a workshop, so that you don't have wind blowing away the shielding gas, something like that. And it's used because it's a very reliable, simple way to do it, and you get very high quality because of the shielding gas. There. Whatever your summary was. And then, how is steel process standardized and controlled, and how is the workforce trained? Again, this is straight from your thing, but these are the high points. These are the things that, in my opinion, are the most important items for you to have soaked in from your work. And look, if you feel that your portfolio was a little light, you can add information. Feel free to do so. Okay, under standardization, there are certain specifications. You can talk about those specification agencies, and there are test specifications, and you can talk about the people that do the tests. There are training agencies that work with the workforce, and so you can really do some nice work there. For wood, what type of wood did you choose? Was it hemlock, fir, spruce, whatever it happened to be? Where is it grown? Environment it likes dry, it likes wet, it likes mountainous, it likes sandy. How much is grown annually? They grow, 50 bazillion hectares or 20,000 cubic feet or whatever it is. Just put that information down. And then talk about 4 different wood milling processes. There was cant sawing, and I don't even remember them off the top of my head, but there's different milling processes, and you just have to identify those. You don't have to explain them, just identify 4 different milling. There's quartering, can't saw. I'm just being a blank right now. And 2 different aging processes. Well, right off the top, there's air and kiln dried. So those are 2 of the most common ones, air and kiln dried, and describe them. Air dried is left in the open atmosphere for a certain amount of time to get to a certain percent of moisture in the wood. Kiln drying is do a good job with that. So now, describe what is meant by sustainable. In all of our notes, the main thing was that you either, and this was on all of the study guides, you can either replace that material before the life of the product is used, or it is so abundant that it's considered to be an infinite supply. That's really what it means. And then, of course, the other sustainable is use less stuff. Okay? So there we go. That's point 5 also. Okay? Now, we've talked about this, but I'm going to say it just flat out. Okay? Volkswagen, are they a good role model of professionalism? Did they follow the standards and understand the standards and be transparent about how they met the standards? No. They cheated. The whole diesel thing, right? They actually programmed their car to work in 2 different ways, their engines. They worked one way on the test stand, and they went another way in actual real performance. And they did it so they could sell. And they did it on purpose, and they tried to cover it up. So they are a horrible role model. So, the worst possible example. Okay? Now, they say they've changed their tune and they're doing everything better, and oh, I bet, yeah. So your solar trainer friend had just bought one when the news came out. Yeah. That was unhappiness right there. And you know, and you can imagine, you think as a consumer that you're doing this really, really cool thing, and then you find out that you've done just the opposite. You know? What a bummer. Total bummer. So, and I have mentioned it a bunch of times, so they are not a role. Now, there are other companies that are also not role models, but they were probably the most forward and out there and horrendous. I'd put Boeing as even worse, because Boeing relied on their good reputation for really following things, and they were allowed to self-certify many things based on what they claimed were their own internal procedures, and then they submitted those procedures, and they on purpose did not follow them. And it was on purpose. I feel sorry for the engineers who were working to the best of their knowledge that those procedures were being followed, or who were so new that they didn't have a clue about what to do. But I think Boeing is probably worse than Volkswagen, because not only were they doing things wrong, but the level of damage was even worse. I mean, you could say, okay, well, at least with Volkswagen, it wasn't worse than what they were making before. They were just lying and cheating, and like your friend said, thought saying they were doing something good. Very few people were actually harmed or killed. Now, there are studies that said the amount of carbon dioxide that went in the air did this and did that. Um, but those things didn't just fly off the road and crash and kill people like Boeing stuff that came out of the sky. So Boeing, and I'll tell you, I did take aeronautical engineering classes. I almost graduated with an aeronautical engineering degree, but they laid off 20,000 people that year. And so I decided not to be an aeronautical engineer and became a general mechanical designer. The very first thing we were taught, life and safety are your number one objective. Always design so that if anything goes wrong, the airplane devolves to safe. Now, the military doesn't do that, obviously, because they have other things that are more important. And when they have a pilot jump into an airplane, that pilot is accepting that they have an airplane that's super high performance and doesn't devolve to safe. But commercial airliners are supposed to devolve to safe. And they purposefully went around an inherently safe airplane to an airplane that could make the most money. And that is even worse than Volkswagen. So I may have to change my I may have to change it, but you should hopefully everybody who hears this lecture will take that to heart. Number one, safety. And that means that as a designer, you must always put safety first, and you must always follow standards that put safety first. And if you are asked to do the opposite, you are in a horrible position. And I can't speak for other people. I have been personally put in that horrible position at one place where I worked. And to the credit of the management that I worked at, they allowed me to meet the needs in a safe and good way. And they spent the money. So, but oh my gosh, that was a horrible situation. And they basically told me that half the company would be let go if I failed. So that was a booger. That was a bummer. Of course, it was 100 people, so that would be 50 people without a job for not cheating. And that was a horrible position. So hopefully you'll never be put in that position. But if you do, remember what I've said about Volkswagen and remember what I've said about Boeing, and that you must stand up to following good standards and making public safety number one. Okay, so that was a nice long lecture on that. Any questions on all that? Okay, very good. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and I'm going to log off.